to Hilo.
I'm gonna work at the University of Hawaii doing science, studying sea level rise and how it impacts our islands. So in Kailua, I live at the base of Olomana Mountain. I live by Kauai Nui, which is our body of water, our wetland. And the ocean that I've become really pili to is called Kai'olena. That's the name of the part of the ocean that is inside of the Mokuluas, inside of the Twin Islands. This past summer, I was teaching at the University of Hawaii. We were teaching a Makatumakai oceanography class. I was teaching with Rosie. And a big part of our class was we would go out and we would kilo, we would observe. And we started talking about how we observe the places that we would go to for class. So we were mainly in Manoa at the university, as well as on the eastern side in the Ko'olaus. So I really feel, this is my personal opinion, but I really feel that if you can, when you love a place, you love to protect that place. And when you know that place, you know how to protect it. So we as people from a place know the most about our place, and we know the ways in which they might change if we have a storm. We know how they might change if, say, it gets super hot or if the ocean starts rising. So what we tried to encourage all of our students was to just learn more about the places that they come from, and learn the names of the places, learn about yourself, what you value about those places, and also learn how, if change is gonna happen, what people are proposing to change, and how that'll impact you, how that will impact your family, and how that'll impact the place. So I guess by training, through school, I am what you call a geologist. So I get to study place for a living, which is pretty cool. I study islands. I study how islands form and how they change over time. So do any of you guys know how old this island is? It's not a trick question.
It's the youngest I know.
It's the youngest.
But no idea how.
Yeah, so this island is still forming, so it's zero. But do you guys know how old, like when the last time Mauna Kea erupted?
Oh, that was a while.
Yeah, it's about like 80 to 100,000 years old. So I actually asked one of my professors who studies volcanoes, because I don't study volcanoes, but I asked him, I was like, okay, so they say that Mauna Kea is dormant. They say that it's safe. And he told me, as a geologist, they don't use the word dormant. You're either active, like Kilauea, or you're extinct. When we look at Oahu, where we're from, the Ko'olau Mountains, so Oahu's about like 3 or 4 million years old. And the last time the Ko'olaus, when you're a volcano, you erupt, you go bigger, you make land, and then usually you kind of like go to sleep for a little bit, and then later you can erupt again. And on Oahu, it was over 100,000 years after the Ko'olaus kind of went to sleep for a little bit that it erupted again. And like Vavamalu, so Koko Head, Hanauma Bay, like all those pu'us along the southeast side of Oahu, that was all the Ko'olaus coming back to life. So when we look at Mauna Kea and we say the last time it erupted was 80,000 years ago, she's not extinct, you know. There's still a chance that she could erupt again.
Yes.
And when we talk about Mauna Loa, do you guys know the last time Mauna Loa erupted? So I actually had to Google it today, but it was 1984 was the last time Mauna Loa erupted. And they're still monitoring Mauna Loa really closely. She's expected to erupt again. Okay, so Hawaii Island's the youngest. Do you guys know what is the oldest of our islands? Yeah. Do you know how old? 28 million years.
What did he say?
He said Holaniku. That's Kure. So if you can imagine, you have our youngest islands. They're made out of this. They're all black rock. And then when you get up to Holaniku, they're like this. So Holaniku, all of this black rock is all the way, as the island gets older, it erodes, all the black rock sinks, the reef grows up, and then the island is entirely formed out of this. Everything on those atolls, those low-lying islands, is made out of what a reef produces, whether it be coral, shells, parts of like hard algae. So that's the genealogy of our islands. That's the genealogy of Hawaii. So what I do for my research is I study how our islands change over time. And from that, we learn about how our island responds to different things. So I'm gonna pass this around to you guys and take a look at it. This is the top. If you look at the back, it says the top. It's from Kahana Valley. It's from the wetland. So take a look at it and we'll start talking about what we think this is. It looks like a turd.
Quite the imagination, Haunani.
So have any of you guys been to Kahana before? Maybe you guys back there? Can you describe Kahana to us? Plenty of water.
Turd, but yeah.
Yeah, so Kahana, it's a bay. It has pretty steep mountains. It has a beach. It's really sandy. There's reef out upon, like at the corners outside of the bay. And then as you move further inland, it reminds you of what like old Hawaii would look like. You have a stream that's coming from the mountains, and then along the sides of the stream, the ground is really wet, and it's a wetland. So that's why we have a lot of kalo that's grown back there. So I did this project with the folks from the U.S. Geological Society, the USGS, and they came to Hawaii because they wanted to learn more about tsunamis. So I was really lucky. I got to spend like a month with them, and they paid for me to like go to all of the islands with them and to camp. And part of our work was we spent a lot of time in the wetlands collecting things like this. So does it all look the same? No, yeah? So the top part, you'll see it has like a lot of it has like darker mud, and that's the part of the soil where you actually have things living. As you go down, you'll see there's like a white band, and that's actually beach sand. And above and below that, that's the soil from the wetland itself. So if you were to go into a lo'i, you were to get like we call it a core. If you were to like stick a long pipe in the ground and you're able to cap it and pull it out, that's what the ground would look like beneath you in a lo'i. And what that sand is that sand is actually the sand that was washed through Kahana Valley from one of the tsunamis. So I think that one is from 1946. And the reason why, just give this to you guys back here. Did you guys all get to see? So what we do is we study tsunamis. Part of the project was we would study the tsunamis that we experience, or not we, but people experienced during their lifetime. They documented. Any of you guys from Hilo remember any of the tsunamis that were you around with, for any of the tsunamis that came through Hilo? guess, do you guys have any idea of where the earthquakes are that generate them? So Japan usually gets the South Shore. The east side of the islands, a lot of them come from Alaska.
Yeah.
So they come from this chain of islands. So if you can imagine, like, this is Alaska. There's like a chain of islands called the Aleutians that comes off. And a lot of the big tsunamis, the ones that do the most damage here in Hawaii, come from there. In the past, like 600, 700 years ago, there were some really, really big tsunamis that were generated back there. And from our work, we found that those waves that they created were probably like anywhere from 10 to 20 meters. So if you multiply that by 3, that's like 30 to 60 feet waves that came and went all the way inland. They're predicting that, like how they can make predictions with Mauna Loa, they're predicting that the Aleutians, it's not a super stable place. So in the future, there could be another big earthquake up there, and it could hit us along the coast. So what we do is we go and we take samples from the land to get an idea of how past earthquakes from the Aleutians, past earthquakes from, say, Chile, how they have impacted us, so that when we look at the possibility of future earthquakes from those same places, we'll have some idea of how they may impact us as well. And I believe from that research, they're actually going to update some of the tsunami hazard zones along the coast. Okay, so that's earthquakes and tsunamis. I guess now we can talk about sea level rise. Okay, can you hear? Hide it? Okay, so do any of you guys know anything about sea level rise? Do you know what causes sea level rise?
Sea level rise.
Yes.
The melting of the snow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Around the world.
Yeah. So we have seasons, right? We have a cold season. That's when water freezes. Then we have warm season. The water melts and goes into the ocean. So on a seasonal cycle, it's just the movement of the water from the ocean to the land. Okay, but why is it rising? Long term, why is it changing? Why is it rising? Our seasons are becoming more extreme. Our temperature is rising. Do you guys know why our temperature is rising?
Earth warming, bad stuff, all the gases and the pollution, a lot of stuff. So we need to fix
Global warming.
yes.
Yeah. So we have these things called greenhouse gases. Have any of you guys heard of those? Do you guys know what some of the big ones are? Methane. Yep. So when a cow farts, it releases methane. Methane is really good at trapping heat, but it doesn't stick around for that long. Do you guys know what the biggest gas is that warms our Earth? Carbon dioxide, yeah. So if you can imagine, we can all feel the sun right now, yeah? So when the sun comes, it shines on the Earth. Usually you have the sun coming, reflecting off of the ground, and going back out. What happens is when you have these greenhouse gases like carbon, methane, they're up there in the atmosphere. As that heat is getting reflected back off, it actually absorbs the heat and it traps it and it keeps it from escaping our atmosphere. So as we continue to add more of those gases, whether it be by burning fuel when we go on an airplane or when we drive a car, or to create different materials like say my shoes or my jacket, we're just adding more of those gases into the sky. And one of the places that's really important that we use to observe or to kilo the temperature is actually here on Mauna Loa. It's a site that people reference from all over the world. So when we talk about sea level rise it's not the first time that the sea level is rising. This is something that has happened on long time scales, like almost every 100,000 years this has happened in the past for at least the past 500,000 years. And in Hawaii, one of the ways that we study place and we kilo is we study these events. So do you guys, I'm talking a lot about Oahu because that's where I'm from and that's where I know the best, but have any of you guys been to Popoia, to Flat Island? Or to Kapapa Island? Or I don't know the Hawaiian name, or Goat Island? So what are those islands made out of? I think I heard it. They're made out of reef, right? But they're sticking out of the island, they're sticking out of the water like higher than I am if I was to stand up. So those islands all formed about 125,000 years ago. And it formed when sea level was 6 meters, so almost 20 feet higher. So if you look at those islands and you can actually, when you look at the island, you can see pieces of coral like this. And you know, like this right here, it doesn't grow sticking out of the water. It requires a certain amount of water to be on top of it, right? So those islands are all examples of a time when sea level is that much higher. So if you think about that further and you're like, okay, that island, it's now sticking out of the water. So you imagine like along the coast, the water is say 20 feet higher. And then you start to think, okay, you go from, just use Kailua as an example, you go from Kailua Beach, you go inland. Okay, there's Kauai Nui, there's a wetland, but if sea level was higher, that wetland was probably salty, yeah? So you start to think about that. You start to think about what our places were like when sea level was higher, and you start to think about whether or not that would have been a place where people lived. So we talk about Mauna Kea as being Wauakua, being a place of our gods, a place that we necessarily didn't come to on a regular basis. Like we didn't come and live here all the time. And what I think about is if our kupuna were there during that time along the coast, would that have been a place that they would have lived at? Would that have been a place that they would occupy permanently? And if not, then maybe when we think about the future, we also need to think about how we value those places and those spaces. I just thought of that now. So what I actually study is, it's called the Kapapa Stand. It's based upon research that was done at Kapapa Island. So have you guys, any of you guys been to Kapapa Island in Kaneohe? Yeah? So on Kapapa Island, there's a sandy beach, like there's sand in the middle part of the island. And what they have found is that, like say 2,000 to 4,000 years ago, so not that long ago, sea level was about 3 feet to 6 feet higher. And during that time, that reef wasn't completely underwater, but there was a beach on top of it. And that's the event that I study. That's the level of sea level that they're predicting by 2100, by the end of this century. And what we do is we try to understand how that event impacted Hawaii as an example of what might happen in the future as sea level continues to rise. So that's kind of all that I got. Do you guys have any questions, or do you guys want to share anything about the way that you kilo, whether it be at your homes or on a va'a? There's lots of va'a people. I don't know where Kealoha went. Yes.
So my question is that, there's been these repeated rises and falls in sea level. But from my understanding, this is so significantly different because we've lost nearly half of the world's forests and we're losing species at a rapid rate. So there's this whole human-caused thing. So could you talk about the difference between that, like rise and fall, and what's happening now in terms of both severity and actuality, whatever you know, to make it more clear?
Yeah. So this is gonna get kind of weird, but so all the times that sea level changed in the past, it was also due to changes in temperature and changes in heat, but it wasn't because there were people who were adding these gases into the atmosphere and warming the earth. All of the other times it had to do with the earth itself. So it had to do with, if you imagine that the earth is rotating, usually the earth is like in a circle, but every like 100,000 years or so, it changes from being circular to more of like an egg shape around the sun. And that changes our heat budget, because now you're like super far away from the sun, then you get close and super far away. There's also the earth, sometimes it changes and it wobbles more, or the tilt will change. So in the past, what they say is that changes in our heat, which cause changes in sea level, were because of these natural changes in the earth itself and the way the earth moves around the sun. So if you look at the actual history, we should be getting colder again based upon that time frame. But we're getting warmer because we're adding all of these gases into the air. We're pulling them up from beneath, all that carbon from the center of the earth, to make oil, to burn oil, to make plastics, and we're putting it in the air, and the earth just can't really balance itself out, so we're getting hotter.
Sounds like that's the good news, that we have that much coolness to offset the artificial warming.
That's very optimistic. Yeah, thank you. Yes, Rosie?
Hawaiians or Polynesians were saw the elevated sea level rise before it dropped.
Yeah, I think so. So archaeologists have actually been looking at this, and they looked at the last time sea level was higher, and sea level was high and then it fell. And as it fell, you can imagine like the coast got wider. There's more flat, nice land exposed. Like there's more places along the coast that you'd want to live that became exposed. And it was during that time when that was happening that a lot of the islands in the central Pacific were found by our voyagers. So like Samoa, even the Cook Islands, and even in the Marshall Islands in parts of Micronesia, the first voyages coincided with that. And what they found in Micronesia is there are certain islands where the first people actually arrived and started planting like canoe plants and started growing the types of foods that they needed when sea level was higher. So there are examples of these islands that people came to when sea level was higher, and it wasn't exactly maybe as the best to live at, but they were able to make them good because we're resilient. Yes, Mom?
Okay, so I remember going to your dissertation, and we knew that this was going to happen, the sea level rise, but there's other Polynesian areas that are
using that as an advantage, like they're building their houses higher so that they won't be affected, right? Remember? Where was that?
That was in Micronesia. So, in some of the more like populated urban areas, they're actually starting to armor their islands. They're starting to build seawalls. They're starting to elevate their homes. And it has come with, some people say like they're protecting their homes at the expense of like, say, the natural resources that might be there. But I don't know, I feel like we're not there. People are telling them that they're islands. So these are low-lying islands where the tallest parts are the coconut trees. They're only like 3 to 6 feet above the ground. And they're being told that their islands are going to be washed away in the next 100 years. So I don't really think it's our place to judge the ways in which they protect their home or the ways in which they try to ensure that they continue to live in their homes. Any other questions? Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.